How I went from $500 in my bank account to owning a multi-million-dollar business. Let me start by saying that this isn't a fairy tale. It's not about some magical formula that you can follow and become rich overnight. But I'm hoping my story can give someone the same spark that I needed when I was just starting out. If you're on the fence about starting a business or wondering if it's too late, this one's for you. I grew up in a small town where most people didn't expect much from life. The economy was bad, the job market was worse, and the general vibe was that if you weren't part of the established system, you weren't going anywhere. My parents were hardworking, but their mindset was a product of their environment. Get a good job, save up, and don't rock the boat. Their approach was practical, but it didn't exactly inspire me to chase big dreams. After high school, I went to college with the plan to get a degree in something safe, business administration. But to be honest, I didn't even know what that meant. I just picked something that seemed like it would lead to a stable career. I graduated, and with a shiny degree in hand, I landed a job at a marketing firm. The pay was decent for someone fresh out of school, but I hated the work. My boss was a micromanager, the office was full of drama, and I felt completely stifled. I knew deep down that I didn't belong there. I had been reading a lot about entrepreneurship in my free time. The hustle, the grind, the freedom. I felt a pull to do something on my own, but I had no idea what. I started dabbling in side projects, trying different things. I sold custom t-shirts on Etsy, attempted to start a blog, and even tried drop shipping for a short while. Each of these ventures failed miserably. I was making a few dollars here and there, but it was never enough to make a real dent in my financial situation. Things took a serious turn when I found myself in a financial bind. I had around $500 left in my bank account, no savings, and the bills were piling up. It was either sink or swim. One night, sitting at my desk after work, I had a realization. I had spent so much time trying to figure out the perfect business idea that I was overthinking it. Maybe the key wasn't to come up with something new or groundbreaking. Maybe I just needed to start something that people already wanted. I had always loved fitness, but I didn't want to start a fitness channel or blog. It seemed like there was an oversaturation of that. What I noticed was that there were a lot of people in my gym who didn't know what they were doing. They would come in, spend hours on machines, and get no results. They wanted a personal trainer, but they couldn't afford the rates at local gyms, which were ridiculously overpriced. I had a light bulb moment. Why not offer affordable, personalized fitness plans to people who couldn't afford a personal trainer? I could do it online and charge a fraction of the price of a typical trainer. And so, I decided to dive in. I had a few $100s left, and I knew it was now or never. I built a website using free tools. I created a couple of social media pages, offering free advice and tips on fitness, and started posting workout routines. At first, it felt like no one cared. For weeks, I only had a few followers, mostly friends and family. But I kept posting consistently, refining my message, and engaging with anyone who reached out. Slowly, things started to build up. I got my first paying client, a woman who had been following my free content and needed help losing weight. I remember that first payment, $50. It felt like a small victory, but it was everything. I had made money doing something I loved. That $50 gave me the confidence I needed to keep going. I reinvested that money into better marketing, better tools, and hired a mentor to help me with my online business strategy. As the months went by, I started attracting more clients. Word of mouth started working in my favor. I created a scalable system where I could provide personalized plans for each client without burning out. I leveraged automation tools for scheduling, payment processing, and even creating digital products like workout guides that could be sold without me having to interact one-on-one with every client. My business grew steadily, but I knew I had to think bigger if I wanted to make this my full-time gig. So I rebranded. I took my fitness brand from a one-man operation to a small team. I hired a couple of trainers, an assistant to handle admin tasks, and an accountant. I also decided to build an online fitness community, offering exclusive workout videos, live classes, and member challenges. This was a game changer. I was able to create a recurring revenue model by offering monthly memberships to my online community. It was around this time that I realized I had crossed a threshold. My business wasn't just a side hustle anymore. It was becoming a real business. I left my corporate job a year and a half after I first launched. I still remember walking into my boss's office, handing in my resignation letter, and feeling both terrified and liberated. In the years that followed, The business grew exponentially. I expanded into nutrition coaching, opened an app where clients could track their progress, and started collaborating with brands. We went from being a one-person operation to having a full team and a six-figure revenue within the first 2 years. By year 4, we crossed the $2 million mark. And today, my company is worth over $10 million. Looking back, the success didn't come from some big idea or major innovation. It came from recognizing a gap in the market, staying consistent, and being willing to pivot when things didn't work. Every failure, every setback, and every moment of doubt was part of the process. The most important lesson I learned is that there's never a perfect time to start. You can't wait for the right moment or for all your ducks to be in a row. If I had waited until I had more money, a better plan, or more experience, I would still be sitting at that corporate desk wondering what could have been. Instead, I started with $500, made a leap of faith, and worked my ass off to make it happen. So, if you're reading this and you're stuck, wondering if you should take the plunge into entrepreneurship, just know that you're not alone. If I can do it, so can you. You don't need a ton of money, an elaborate plan, or a network of connections. You just need the courage to start, the discipline to keep going, and the resilience to bounce back from failure. The rest will follow. It's been a wild ride, and I'm far from done. I'm excited about the future, and I hope my story inspires at least one person to take action and go for it. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I never thought I'd end up here, telling a story like this. You know, the one where you go from being broke and uncertain to running a multi-million-dollar business that you started from scratch. It wasn't a linear path. Hell, there were days when I thought about giving up altogether, but looking back, I can see how each step, no matter how painful or frustrating, led me to where I am now. Let me take you back to the beginning. I graduated from college with a degree in marketing. It wasn't exactly my dream major, but it seemed like the most practical option. My parents were thrilled. They thought I had a bright future ahead. What they didn't know was that I was completely lost. I didn't have a passion for marketing, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So, like many graduates, I did what was expected of me. I took a normal job. For the first couple of years, I worked as a marketing assistant at a small firm. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady. I had a 9-to-5, health benefits, and a predictable life. But deep down, I was miserable. I remember sitting at my desk, watching the clock tick toward the end of the workday, thinking, is this really it? Is this the dream I've been sold? I started to feel like I was wasting my time, working for someone else's dreams while mine slipped further away. So, after a lot of internal debates and sleepless nights, I decided to quit my job. I didn't have another job lined up, and I didn't have a safety net. I just knew that I couldn't keep living like this. I needed to do something that felt meaningful. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew one thing. I loved fashion. I didn't know the first thing about running a business, but I'd always admired the way fashion brands seemed to capture attention and create loyalty. So, I decided to start my own clothing line. I'll be honest, I had zero experience in fashion design. I didn't know how to source materials, create designs, or even market a product. But I did know how to research, and that's what I threw myself into. I spent hours online, reading about the industry, watching YouTube tutorials, and talking to anyone who would listen. I made mistakes, of course, tons of them. My first batch of products was a disaster. The fabric was cheap, the stitching was awful, and the designs were, well, let's just say they were experimental. I didn't have much money to start with, so I had to get creative. I used the last of my savings to order a small batch of t-shirts, hoping I could sell them online. I built a simple website on Shopify, learned a little bit about SEO, and started posting on social media. To my surprise, a few people started buying. They weren't friends or family, they were strangers. That's when I realized something. I had tapped into a niche market. There were people out there who were willing to pay for what I was offering, even if it wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, though. There were months of self-doubt and feeling like a failure. I spent every waking moment trying to figure out how to improve my business, how to get more people to see my brand. I didn't have a mentor or any connections in the fashion world. It was just me, Google, and a lot of hustle. One thing I learned early on was the importance of branding. People weren't just buying a t-shirt, they were buying into the idea behind it. I realized that if I wanted to build a brand, I needed to make it personal. So, I started sharing my story on social media. I talked about the challenges I was facing, the mistakes I had made, and the lessons I had learned. I didn't try to present myself as some polished, perfect entrepreneur. I was raw, unfiltered, and honest. And that resonated with people. As the months passed, my business began to grow. Slowly at first, but the growth was steady. I reinvested every penny I made back into the business, upgrading my designs, improving my website, and trying new marketing strategies. I hired a freelance designer to help me refine my products, and I worked with influencers to get my brand in front of a larger audience. Eventually, my brand started to get noticed. I wasn't making millions, but I was starting to see the kind of traction that could lead to something bigger. Then came the breakthrough moment. One day, a popular influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers posted about my brand. It was a complete surprise, and I had no idea it was coming. Within hours, my website crashed from the influx of traffic. I couldn't believe it. I scrambled to restock my inventory, and I had to hire someone to help me with customer service because the orders were pouring in. That one post changed everything. Suddenly, my brand wasn't just a side hustle, it was a legitimate business. I was making more money in a single day than I had in months. But with that success came new challenges. I had to learn how to scale, how to manage production, handle shipping, and keep up with customer demand. It was a constant balancing act, and for a while, I felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. At some point, I realized that I couldn't do it all alone. I needed help, and I had to learn how to build a team. That was one of the hardest lessons I had to learn. I had always been a solo operator, but I couldn't grow the business without trusting others. I brought on a small team of dedicated people who shared my vision and worked their asses off to help the business succeed. Fast forward a few years, and my business is unrecognizable from where it started. We've expanded into other product lines, opened physical stores, and have a loyal customer base. I've learned a lot along the way, and I'm still learning every day. But if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that the journey is worth it. It's not easy, and it's not quick. But if you're willing to put in the work and stay true to your vision, anything is possible. I'm proud of what I've built, but I never forget where I came from. I remember the sleepless nights, the doubts, and the fear of failure. But all those struggles led me to this point, and for that, I'm grateful. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if I can do it, so can you. Just keep going, no matter how hard it gets. Because at the end of the day, the journey is what makes it all worthwhile. I've always had the entrepreneurial itch. Ever since I was a kid, I had that spark in me, selling lemonade on the street corner or organizing neighborhood yard sales. However, life has a way of throwing curveballs, and it took me a while to realize what my real passion was. I graduated college with a degree in marketing, but like so many others, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I bounced from job to job, never feeling fulfilled, until one fateful evening that changed everything. It was a night in late 2019, and I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through social media when I saw an ad for a new online business platform that promised to help people like me build their own e-commerce stores. At the time, I didn't have a clear direction, but something clicked. I was tired of being a cog in someone else's machine, and I wanted to create something of my own. I didn't know exactly what it was going to be, but I knew it had to be online. It seemed like the perfect time. People were spending more time online than ever, and e-commerce was booming. I had a couple $100s saved up, but that was it. I didn't have a business loan, a mentor, or any real experience. I just had a lot of determination and a desire to succeed. I used the platform I found to build a simple online store. My first product? Custom phone cases. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something I could start small with. I figured, hey, everyone has a phone, right? It seemed like a good market to tap into. But I learned quickly that starting a business isn't just about having an idea, it's about making the idea work. I spent weeks designing a website, choosing suppliers, and figuring out how to market the product. It was exhausting, and there were plenty of sleepless nights. My first month, I made just $50 in sales. It was a crushing blow. I had hoped to make enough to cover my costs, but I was far from that. Despite the setback, I refused to quit. I started researching more about online marketing, Facebook ads, Instagram influencers, SEO, everything. I learned that selling products online isn't about having the best product, it's about reaching the right audience. I started running targeted ads on Facebook and Instagram, hoping to generate more traffic to my site. The second month came around, and the sales were still low, but I noticed a slight increase. The third month, however, was when things started to change. I was starting to see consistent sales. Nothing huge, but enough to keep me motivated. I reinvested every penny back into the business, upgrading my website, expanding my product range, and hiring a part-time freelancer to handle customer service. As the months went by, I kept tweaking and refining my approach. I wasn't just selling phone cases anymore. I started offering personalized options, expanding into laptop sleeves, and even custom apparel. I learned that you need to diversify and constantly adapt. I tried to keep my overhead low, working from home and handling most of the operations myself in the beginning. But as the business grew, I realized that I couldn't do it all. In early 2021, I took the leap and hired my first full-time employee. It was a huge step for me, one that I wasn't sure I was ready for. I had to trust someone else with parts of the business I had always done myself. But hiring the right people made a world of difference. My first employee was a graphic designer who helped create even better product designs. I also hired a digital marketing specialist who taught me more about running effective ads and analyzing the data behind them. This was when I realized how important it was to have a team that could bring different skills to the table. By mid-2021, my business was officially in the black. I was no longer just scraping by. I was able to afford to invest in inventory, expand my product offerings, and upgrade my website. I also began experimenting with influencer marketing, which led to a huge boost in sales. I'll never forget the day one influencer posted a picture of themselves wearing one of my custom shirts. My sales tripled in one day. It felt like I was on top of the world, but I also knew that this was just one piece of the puzzle. The challenges didn't stop there. With success came new problems, managing inventory, handling customer complaints, and scaling the business without losing quality. I had to learn how to delegate and manage a growing team. I realized that as the CEO, my job wasn't to do everything myself. It was to make sure the right people were in the right roles and empower them to do their best work. I spent less time designing and more time overseeing operations and strategy. 2022 was a pivotal year for my business. By now, I had built a small but strong team, and we were making serious strides. I took the company through a rebrand, changing the name and logo to reflect the new direction I wanted to take. We expanded into new markets and started selling internationally, which opened up a whole new set of opportunities. I also started a podcast to share my experiences and lessons learned along the way, which helped build my personal brand and connected me with other entrepreneurs. However, even with all the success, there were still tough times. We faced supply chain disruptions, rising costs, and an increasingly competitive market. I had to make tough decisions, like cutting some products that weren't selling and adjusting our pricing strategy. It wasn't easy, but every decision taught me valuable lessons in business management, resilience, and adaptability. In 2023, my company hit $5 million in revenue, a milestone I never thought I'd reach. But with that success came the realization that I had a responsibility, not just to my customers, but to my employees, my partners, and the community. I started focusing more on corporate social responsibility, making sure we were giving back and using our platform for good. We began donating a percentage of profits to causes related to environmental sustainability and mental health. Looking back, it feels surreal. It's been a long journey, and while it's far from over, I'm proud of how far I've come. I didn't have a roadmap when I started. I just had a dream and a lot of grit. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that entrepreneurship isn't a straight path. It's filled with ups and downs, victories and failures, and you have to learn how to ride the waves. But if you stay committed, keep learning, and surround yourself with the right people, success will come. I'm not the same person I was when I first started. The challenges I faced shaped me into a stronger leader and a more resilient individual. And now, I get to help others who are just starting their own journeys. I never thought I'd get here, but now that I have, I can't wait to see what the next 5 years will bring. So, if you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, I've got one piece of advice: don't give up. The road will be tough, and the obstacles will seem insurmountable at times, but keep pushing forward. You might be closer to success than you think. This is a long one, so grab a cup of coffee. So, let me start from the beginning. I'm a 30-year-old entrepreneur, and for the last 3 years, I've been running a successful e-commerce business. But the road to where I am now wasn't easy, and I've learned a ton about failure, persistence, and the importance of timing. I'll rewind a bit and tell you how it all started. About 5 years ago, I was fresh out of college with a degree in marketing, but like many people my age, I didn't have much direction. I moved back in with my parents, mostly because I couldn't afford rent on my own and needed a cushion to figure things out. I had a few odd jobs, and honestly, I was barely getting by. My dream, like most, was to start a business and be my own boss, but I had no clue where to start. One day, I was scrolling through Instagram, and I saw this ad for some custom t-shirts. They looked great, and the company behind them had a solid following. It sparked something in me. I thought, hey, I can do this. I didn't have any technical skills, no design background, and certainly no money to hire people, but I figured I could learn. I spent weeks researching how to design, how to source shirts, how to run an online store, and how to market it. The first few months were pure trial and error. I launched a Shopify store, which at the time seemed like the easiest option, and I started creating designs. They were terrible. I'm talking about designs that looked like a middle schooler's first attempt at Photoshop. But I didn't care. I launched the site anyway, with like 5 t-shirt designs, and prayed someone would buy. But no one did. For a long time, no one did. I didn't have money for ads, so I relied solely on organic social media. My first real breakthrough came from posting a design on Instagram. It was a meme about a topic everyone was talking about at the time, the World Cup. It was a simple design, something that poked fun at a popular player, but it went viral. I had never experienced something like that before. I was getting dozens of messages from people asking where they could buy the shirt. My heart raced. This was it. This was my big moment. But then, I made the rookie mistake of assuming that a viral post would automatically mean success. I thought I had figured it out. So, I scrambled to order more inventory, ramp up my designs, and throw a bunch of money at paid ads. The thing is, I didn't understand the importance of building a brand. I didn't understand that people need to trust you, not just your product. I didn't understand that having a great design was only part of the equation. And when I did try to get more customers, it was like they didn't even care anymore. My sales plummeted. I had to close the store. I was devastated, but I refused to give up. After all, it was my dream to be a successful entrepreneur. I spent the next 6 months working a day job in digital marketing to support myself while rethinking my approach. I used the time to dig into marketing and branding, learning from some of the best in the industry. One thing I kept hearing was that businesses don't fail because of the product, they fail because of the marketing. So, I got to work. I rebranded everything, studied my target audience, and learned how to build a sustainable community online. I realized I needed to focus on more than just a product. I needed to give people a reason to connect with me, to care about my brand. I launched my second attempt at an online store with a new product line, but this time I did it differently. I wasn't just selling t-shirts anymore. I was selling a lifestyle. I started creating content that spoke to my audience's pain points, things they cared about. I created blog posts, videos, and memes that resonated with them. Slowly but surely, I built a community. Then came another breakthrough: influencers. I realized I didn't have to pay a ton of money for influencers with massive followings. I started working with micro-influencers who had smaller but more engaged audiences. I sent them free products in exchange for honest reviews, and the results were incredible. I wasn't just selling shirts anymore. I was building relationships with my customers. People felt like they were part of something bigger, and that's what really made the difference. Fast forward to today, my business is booming. We're making 6 figures a year, and I've hired a small team to help with the workload. I've learned a ton of hard lessons, but it's all been worth it. The road to success wasn't as glamorous as I thought it would be, but it's been incredibly rewarding. There were plenty of times I wanted to quit. There were nights I stayed up crying, wondering if I was making the right decisions. But here's the thing I've learned: success isn't a straight line. It's full of twists and turns. It's about getting back up when you fall, about constantly learning, and being willing to adapt. I think one of the biggest things that helped me get here was that I learned to embrace failure. I realized that failing wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of the next chapter. Every failure taught me something new. It's like a video game, you know? You fail, you level up, and you try again. If I hadn't failed that first time, I wouldn't have learned the lessons that made me successful this time around. Another important lesson I learned is that success doesn't happen overnight. It's easy to look at people on social media and think they just popped up out of nowhere and became successful. But the reality is, they've put in years of hard work, failed countless times, and faced a lot of rejection. They're just the ones who kept going. So, to anyone reading this who's thinking about starting their own business, don't be afraid to fail. In fact, embrace it. It's the best teacher you'll ever have. And when things get tough, and they will, remember that it's all part of the journey. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep pushing forward. You never know when your breakthrough is just around the corner. I'm proof of that. This is the story of how I went from a broke college student with nothing but a laptop and a dream to building a business that now earns 6 figures a year. It wasn't easy, and there were a lot of sleepless nights and countless mistakes along the way. But somehow, I made it. I hope my story can inspire someone out there who feels like they're stuck or that success is out of reach. Let's rewind a few years. I was in my junior year of college, completely broke and living off ramen noodles. I didn't have a fancy job, a trust fund, or even a clear idea of what I wanted to do with my life. I was studying computer science because it was something that interested me, but even then, I didn't feel like it was enough to get me where I wanted to go. One night, I was scrolling through Reddit when I stumbled upon a thread about side hustles. People were sharing their experiences with everything from e-commerce to freelance design work, and it got me thinking, what if I could turn my skills into something more than just a degree? I had always been good at coding, so I started thinking about ways I could use that to make money. I didn't have much to start with, but I had time and determination. I decided to build a website. I didn't know exactly what it would be yet, but I figured that was a good place to start. I spent the next few weeks learning everything I could about web development and digital marketing. I spent countless hours after class working on my website. At first, I made a ton of mistakes, like the time I accidentally deleted an entire section of code and had to rebuild it from scratch. But as time went on, things started coming together. Eventually, I decided to create an online marketplace for custom website templates. There were plenty of platforms out there for people to buy and sell templates, but I wanted to focus on providing high-quality designs that were easy to customize. I wasn't trying to compete with the big players in the market. I was just trying to carve out a small niche that I could dominate. At first, sales were slow. I had no reputation, no customer reviews, and no marketing budget. But I kept going. I started to reach out to influencers in the web design community and offer them free templates in exchange for exposure. I also spent hours optimizing my website's SEO and running targeted ads on social media. Slowly but surely, traffic started to grow. One of the first major breakthroughs came when I was featured on a popular design blog. That exposure brought in a flood of customers, and I was able to make my first sale $100. I know it doesn't sound like much, but to me, that was a game changer. It wasn't just the money, it was the validation. Someone out there believed in my product enough to pay for it. From there, things started snowballing. I continued to improve my templates, add new ones to my collection, and grow my customer base. I also learned how to better manage my time, balancing school with running a business. I even hired a few freelancers to help me with tasks like graphic design and marketing, so I could focus on the development side of things. By the time I graduated, my business was generating a steady income. I had already started outsourcing some of the work, so I was able to focus on creating new templates and expanding my product line. I also started offering services like custom website design and consulting, which helped increase my revenue even more. But of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were plenty of challenges along the way. I hit some serious roadblocks when my website was hacked one summer. It was devastating. I had to rebuild everything from scratch and lost a lot of revenue during the downtime. I also had to deal with customers who were upset about delayed orders and other issues, and I'll admit, there were times when I thought about quitting. But instead of throwing in the towel, I doubled down. I learned everything I could about cybersecurity and made sure my website was bulletproof. I improved my customer service skills and put processes in place to avoid delays in the future. Each setback taught me something valuable that helped me grow both as a person and as an entrepreneur. By the end of my first year post-graduation, I had already made my first $100,000 in revenue. It wasn't all profit, of course. I had expenses, taxes, and other costs to account for, but it was a major milestone. I had proved to myself that I could build a successful business from the ground up. Fast forward to today, and my business has grown beyond what I ever thought was possible. I now have a full team of people helping me with everything from product development to customer service. My revenue is consistently 6 figures, and I've even been able to start investing in other projects, including a small software development company. The best part? I still love what I do. I get to spend my days working on something that I'm passionate about, and I'm in control of my own destiny. I no longer feel like I'm stuck in a cycle of waiting for the next paycheck or waiting for someone to give me an opportunity. I created my own opportunity, and it's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. Of course, I've made my fair share of mistakes. I've missed opportunities, made bad investments, and learned some lessons the hard way. But I've also had some incredible wins along the way, like when I landed a contract with a major client or when I expanded my business internationally. These moments make all the hardships worthwhile. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's that there's no right path to success. Everyone's journey is different, and there's no secret formula that guarantees you'll make it. The only thing you can control is your effort. If you're willing to put in the work, keep learning from your mistakes, and stay persistent, then success is within your reach. Looking back, I never would have imagined that I'd be where I am today. But if I hadn't taken that first step, if I hadn't made the decision to start my business while I was still in college, I would have never gotten here. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And I wouldn't trade this journey for anything. So to anyone out there who feels stuck or is wondering if they can ever make it as an entrepreneur, my advice is this: take that first step. It doesn't matter how small it is. Just start. The rest will follow. Good luck to everyone out there. If I can do it, so can you. Keep grinding, keep learning, and keep believing in yourself. End of story. So, about 4 years ago, I started my first real business. I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur, ever since I was a kid. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood, and although my parents weren't rich, they did their best to give me a good education and work ethic. But as much as I appreciated that, I knew I wanted something more. I didn't want to just climb some corporate ladder for 40 years, only to retire and look back, wondering what the hell I'd actually done with my life. I was 26 when the idea hit me. I had been working a typical 9-to-5 job in an office, crunching numbers and barely surviving the daily grind. But on the weekends, I'd hang out with friends who had started their own small ventures. A few were freelance designers, one had a small e-commerce store, another was a social media consultant. They had their own thing going, and as much as I wanted to feel happy for them, I couldn't help but feel envious of their freedom. I wanted that too. One evening, I was sitting at home, flipping through old photos of my childhood, when I stumbled upon a picture of me as a teenager, sitting in front of a pile of books on finance and entrepreneurship. I had always wanted to be my own boss, but I just hadn't known how to get there. At that moment, I realized something. I had all the knowledge in the world at my fingertips. The internet was full of resources. Why hadn't I started earlier? So, I did what any ambitious person would do. I Googled how to start an online business. Of course, there were millions of articles, and it felt like everyone had advice. But what struck me the most was how many of these successful entrepreneurs had started small. Really small. They didn't have giant startup funds. They didn't have a fancy team. They had an idea and hustle, and that's what pushed them forward. I thought about it and realized that I didn't need to create the next big tech innovation to get started. Instead, I needed to find a niche that I was passionate about, something that people needed and were willing to pay for. After a bit of soul-searching, I landed on a business idea: online course creation. I had always been good at explaining complicated things in a simple way. Throughout my career, I had helped coworkers and friends with anything from tech problems to learning new software. And I'd often get feedback like, "Wow, I finally understand it now, thanks to you." I figured there had to be a market for people who needed help with things like personal finance, basic coding, or even general life skills, things that weren't necessarily taught in schools, but were incredibly valuable. I started by creating a simple course on personal finance. I wrote the course material in my free time, recording video lessons in my living room with a basic camera and editing the footage on free software. I launched it on a website I built myself. The first version of the course was awful. The videos were shaky, the sound was awful, and the content was just okay. But the key takeaway was that I did it. I launched. The first few months were brutal. I didn't make much money, and I was starting to doubt myself. But I refused to quit. I spent every free hour refining my course, learning how to market it better, and engaging with potential customers. Slowly, the sales started trickling in. Not a lot, but enough to keep me going. I'd sell 1 or 2 courses a week at first. I celebrated each sale like it was a huge victory, because to me, it was. I had created something that someone wanted. I then expanded the course offerings, adding modules about time management, productivity, and even some soft skills like negotiation. But the turning point came when I realized I wasn't just selling courses, I was selling myself. People were buying into my story, my passion, and the fact that I was constantly improving. I started posting more on social media, giving away small free tips and tricks, and offering personalized advice. The engagement grew. By the end of my first year, I had made around $30,000. It wasn't life-changing, but it was enough to prove to myself that I could do it. The second year, I invested that money into upgrading my course and building a website that looked more professional. I also began experimenting with paid ads on Facebook and Google. That's when things really started to take off. The ads worked like a charm, and soon I was getting 100+ signups every month. The revenue grew exponentially. I finally reached the point where I could quit my job. But that wasn't the end of the journey. The business was still a one-man operation, and I was working 12-hour days. The stress started to take a toll on me. I realized that in order to keep growing, I'd have to bring in help. I hired a virtual assistant to handle customer support and a freelance videographer to help with content creation. It felt amazing to delegate tasks and focus on the bigger picture. I also started collaborating with influencers in my niche, which helped expand my reach and credibility. Fast forward to today, and my business is now bringing in over $500,000 annually. I've launched multiple courses, created a membership community, and even started a podcast. I still can't believe how far I've come from that shaky first course launch. But here's the thing I want to emphasize. It wasn't easy. It took years of trial and error, and there were plenty of moments where I wanted to quit. There were times when I thought I wasn't good enough, or that the market was too saturated. But persistence paid off. I learned that it's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the person who keeps showing up, who keeps learning, and who is willing to adapt. The best part? I have the freedom now to do what I love, without being chained to a desk for 8 hours a day. I can travel, work from anywhere, and, most importantly, I can help others build their own businesses by sharing what I've learned. I get messages every day from people who've taken my courses and started their own businesses, and there's nothing more rewarding than that. If I could go back in time and tell myself something, it would be this: start sooner. Don't wait for the perfect moment, because it'll never come. You'll never feel ready, but that's okay. Just take that first step. It might be messy at first, but it'll get better. It'll be worth it. Starting a business wasn't easy, but it was one of the best decisions I ever made. And now I get to wake up every day doing what I love, helping others, and living life on my terms. It's not about the money anymore. It's about making a real impact on my own terms. I had always been the kind of person who hated authority. As a kid, I was the one in school constantly getting in trouble for speaking my mind, questioning teachers, and never following the rules. I was the dreamer, the one who always had a vision for what could be. But let's be honest, my childhood wasn't glamorous. My parents were immigrants who worked 2 jobs just to make ends meet. We didn't have much. I wore hand-me-down clothes. My shoes were always 2 sizes too small, and the food on our table was never anything fancy. But despite the lack of luxury, I always believed that if I worked hard enough, I could break free from that cycle. I just needed a chance to prove myself. Fast forward to my early 20s, and that hunger for success was burning brighter than ever. I had just graduated from college with a degree in business, but like most young grads, I found myself stuck in an entry-level job at a marketing agency. The pay was decent, but I wasn't passionate about it. Every day felt like a repeat of the last, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more I was meant to do. I started brainstorming ideas on the side. I read countless books on entrepreneurship, watched every TED Talk I could find, and talked to anyone who would listen. I was desperate to find something that would set me apart from the crowd. Eventually, I stumbled upon the idea of launching my own e-commerce store. This was around 2014, when online shopping was really starting to gain traction, and I saw an opportunity. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to take the plunge. I had no savings to speak of, but I had a credit card with a modest limit and a burning desire to make it work. My plan was simple: find a niche product that people would want and scale it. At the time, I was really into fitness and wellness, so I decided to focus on selling eco-friendly yoga mats. I figured there was a growing market for environmentally conscious products, and yoga was trending big time. I had no experience with e-commerce or digital marketing, but I wasn't about to let that stop me. I spent weeks researching suppliers, learning about Shopify, and reading everything I could about running an online store. I remember spending nights at my kitchen table, frantically working on my website, trying to get everything just right. I created a simple, clean design, and wrote all the product descriptions myself. When I finally launched, I was both excited and terrified. My store was live, but I had no idea if anyone would buy. The first few weeks were brutal. I made zero sales. None. I remember refreshing my store's dashboard obsessively, hoping to see at least one order, but it never came. I tried every marketing tactic I could think of: Facebook ads, Instagram influencers, email campaigns, but nothing worked. The worst part? I had already maxed out my credit card. I was living off ramen and trying to make ends meet while watching my business burn through cash with no return. But here's the thing about entrepreneurship that no one tells you. It's brutal. You will fail more times than you succeed. But it's those failures that teach you the most. After about a month of sinking deeper into debt, I was about to throw in the towel. But something kept telling me to keep going. I started reflecting on what I was doing wrong. I realized I hadn't been listening to my customers. I had been so focused on what I thought people wanted that I hadn't actually bothered to ask them what they needed. I went back to the drawing board and revamped my approach. I started reaching out to yoga communities on social media, engaging with them, and asking questions. I began doing surveys, offering small discounts, and most importantly, I started to truly listen. I also realized that I needed to differentiate myself from the hundreds of other yoga mat sellers. That's when I decided to focus on a unique selling point: custom designs. I partnered with a few local artists and began offering personalized yoga mats with custom prints. People loved it. Slowly but surely, my sales started to pick up. In the first month after relaunching with the custom designs, I made my first $1,000 in profit. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get me excited again. I reinvested every dollar I made back into the business, improving my website, running more targeted ads, and even hiring a freelancer to handle customer service. Things were finally starting to gain traction. By year 2, my sales had doubled. And by year 3, I was making 6 figures. But I knew I couldn't stop there. The e-commerce landscape was changing rapidly, and I had to stay ahead of the curve. So, I expanded my product line to include other eco-friendly fitness gear, water bottles, resistance bands, and even biodegradable foam rollers. I also started offering free online yoga classes with every purchase to build a stronger community around my brand. As my business grew, I faced new challenges. I had to learn how to manage a team, deal with inventory shortages, and navigate complex supply chains. There were months when I thought I wouldn't make it. But each time I faced a setback, I'd remind myself why I started in the first place. I wanted to prove to myself that I could create something meaningful from nothing. Fast forward to today, and I'm running a successful, multi-million-dollar business. I've built a team of passionate individuals who share my vision, and I've expanded into new markets, including international shipping. My company is no longer just about selling products. It's about building a movement. I've been able to give back to the community, partner with nonprofits, and even start a scholarship fund for aspiring entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. Looking back, it feels surreal. There were so many times when I felt like giving up, but I kept pushing forward. And now, I get to live the life I once dreamed about. I travel the world, meet incredible people, and work on projects that make a real difference. I'm not saying that being an entrepreneur is easy, far from it, but it's been the most rewarding journey of my life. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: never stop believing in yourself, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. Every setback is an opportunity to learn and grow. The road to success is never straight, but if you stay committed and keep putting in the work, you'll get there. I started my journey with absolutely no business experience, just a small loan, a lot of passion, and an intense desire to make something of myself. My name's Jack, and this is the story of how I built my business from the ground up, went through countless challenges, and ended up learning some invaluable life lessons along the way. My company, which started with a simple idea, has grown into something I'm incredibly proud of today. It all began in 2015, just after I graduated college. Like many fresh grads, I was full of hope and excitement, but clueless about how the real world worked. I didn't come from a wealthy family or have any connections, and I certainly didn't have any entrepreneurial experience. But I had a knack for problem solving and an odd obsession with the food industry, specifically health food. I was always a health-conscious person, and I was constantly experimenting with different ways to make food both nutritious and tasty. One day, while at a coffee shop, I had an epiphany. What if I could combine my love for healthy eating with the growing demand for convenience? So, I decided to create a meal prep business. I thought it was a no-brainer. People are getting busier, and healthy food is more important than ever. What if I could deliver fresh, delicious, and healthy meals to people's doors, saving them the time and energy of cooking while still providing them with nutritious options? It seemed simple enough, but little did I know, it was going to take far more than just a good idea. I had no money to invest, but I wasn't about to let that stop me. I took out a small loan from a local bank, which wasn't easy since my credit was far from perfect, and I used the little savings I had to get started. My first step was to figure out the logistics. I didn't have the space or equipment to cook large batches of food, so I rented a tiny commercial kitchen from a local restaurant during off hours. It wasn't ideal, but it was all I could afford. I spent weeks researching recipes, sourcing ingredients, and experimenting with packaging. I remember the first batch of meals I made. It was terrible. The food was bland, the portions were off, and the packaging looked like it had been done by a child. But I kept at it. The hardest part wasn't the cooking, though. It was marketing. I had no idea how to get customers. I didn't have the luxury of a large marketing budget, so I turned to social media. I created an Instagram account, started posting pictures of the meals I was making, and reached out to a few local fitness influencers, offering them free meals in exchange for a post. Slowly but surely, people started to take notice. At first, it was just a few friends and family ordering, but within a month, the orders started trickling in from people I didn't know. It was a huge moment for me. I'd taken a risk, and it was paying off. But things weren't easy. The kitchen was cramped, and I was doing everything myself, from cooking and packaging to delivering the meals. There were days when I would be working 18 hours straight, trying to keep up with the orders. I didn't have the money to hire anyone yet, so it was all on me. But I was determined to make it work. I started streamlining the process. I improved the packaging, optimized the cooking process, and eventually found a reliable delivery service to help with logistics. Over time, things started to feel less chaotic, and I was able to expand the menu and increase the number of customers. However, there were moments when I thought I might fail. The stress was overwhelming. I had to deal with angry customers who didn't like their meals, delivery issues, and the constant financial strain. I was still paying off the loan, and every month it felt like there was barely enough money to cover the bills. But I kept pushing through because I believed in what I was doing. In 2017, I hit a turning point. I landed a contract with a local gym chain that wanted to offer my meals as part of their membership packages. This was the break I had been waiting for. The orders started coming in bulk, and I had to scale up quickly. I moved into a larger kitchen, hired a small team, and invested in better equipment. The business began to grow at a rapid pace. By the end of 2018, we had expanded to delivering meals across the entire city, and I was finally able to pay off the loan I had taken out years ago. But even as the business grew, I faced new challenges. Competition in the meal prep industry had skyrocketed, and many larger companies with bigger budgets and better resources entered the market. I had to adapt. I realized that what set me apart was my commitment to quality and customer service. I started focusing on customer feedback more than ever, listening to their concerns, and making improvements based on their suggestions. It wasn't always easy, and there were plenty of mistakes along the way, but the more I listened to my customers, the more I understood how to serve them better. Fast forward to today, and my business is a leading player in the meal prep industry. We've expanded into several cities and employ over 50 people. We've launched new product lines, such as vegan and gluten-free options, and we're constantly innovating. But looking back, I realized that none of this would have been possible without those tough early years. I learned that building a business isn't about having all the answers from the start. It's about being adaptable, working hard, and never giving up. One of the biggest lessons I've learned through this journey is the importance of resilience. There were countless moments when I thought about giving up, the financial stress, the late nights, the mistakes. But it was always those moments of doubt that pushed me to work harder and smarter. Every setback was an opportunity to learn and grow, and in the end, that's what got me to where I am today. Starting a business isn't for the faint of heart. It's a roller coaster of highs and lows, and there's no roadmap to success. But if you're willing to put in the work, learn from your mistakes, and stay persistent, you can achieve something incredible. I'm living proof of that. To anyone thinking about starting their own business, my advice is simple. Don't wait for the perfect time because it will never come. Start with what you have and build from there. Trust in yourself and your vision, and don't be afraid to fail. Every failure is just a stepping stone toward success. And above all, remember that success doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, patience, and a lot of hard work. But if you stay committed, the rewards are worth it. Just keep going. You'll get there. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. So, let me tell you about my journey to becoming an entrepreneur. It's a bit of a roller coaster, but it started in a small, almost insignificant way. I grew up in a middle-class family in a sleepy town in the Midwest. My parents were hardworking folks. My dad worked as a mechanic, and my mom was a nurse. Money was never abundant, but it was enough. The kind of childhood where you didn't have the best toys or the coolest clothes, but you were taught to appreciate what you had. I never really understood what business meant when I was younger. To me, it was just a word people used on TV. But in high school, I realized something. I didn't like working for someone else. I saw it in my teachers, my friends' parents, and even my dad. It wasn't the work itself that was the problem. It was the lack of control over what you did every day. That got me thinking. I started researching. I was obsessed with the idea of freedom. I wanted to be in charge of my own future. But back then, I didn't even know where to start. I didn't have any family connections or friends who were entrepreneurs. I was just a teenager who knew that I had to figure something out. So, I did what any teenager would do. I Googled it. My first business idea was so embarrassing that I hardly even want to talk about it. I decided to start a lawn care service. No, not mowing lawns as a side job, full-on lawn care. I spent hours making flyers, printing them on our family printer, and trying to pitch this idea to anyone in my neighborhood who would listen. The reality, though, was a lot less glamorous. My flyers were ugly. My pricing was all wrong. And I realized that running a business was not just about making money. It was about understanding your market, marketing yourself, and managing logistics. It wasn't a total failure. I learned something important. People didn't want to hire a teenager to mow their lawn unless they could see you were reliable. I wasn't even sure if I was reliable at that age. And trust me, getting customers to trust you when you're 16 is harder than you might think. So, I scrapped that idea, but I kept that lesson in the back of my mind. Being an entrepreneur wasn't just about being in charge. It was about gaining trust and building relationships. Fast forward a few years. I'm in college now, and I'm still obsessed with business, but the traditional route doesn't appeal to me. I'm studying marketing, but I can't stop thinking about ways to break the mold. One night, as I'm sitting in my dorm room, it hits me. Everyone was talking about social media. This was around the time when Instagram and Facebook were just starting to become huge. People were trying to figure out how to use these platforms to make money, and I thought, hey, I bet I could help people market their businesses online. I decided to start a social media management business, and honestly, I had no clue what I was doing. I barely even understood how Instagram's algorithm worked, but I had this gut feeling that businesses were going to need help with this. I created a website, which was terrible by the way, and offered my services to local businesses in my area. I emailed them and sent DMs like crazy, pitching my expert services. Spoiler, no one responded. For weeks, it was radio silence. Then, one day, a local coffee shop replied. They said, "We're not really sure how this social media thing works, but we're interested." I almost couldn't believe it. I met with them, pitched some ideas, and they agreed to pay me $500 a month to handle their Instagram account. The catch was, I had no idea how to manage an Instagram account for a business. I started doing everything I could to learn. I followed every expert, read every blog post, and watched tons of YouTube tutorials. Slowly, I figured out how to engage customers and create content that actually worked. It wasn't long before I started getting results for that coffee shop. Their Instagram following grew, and with it, their sales increased. They were thrilled, and word spread. Before I knew it, I had 3 more clients, all from referrals. Now, here's where the real challenge began: scaling. I realized that I couldn't keep doing everything myself. I needed to hire people, but the thought of managing employees terrified me. How do I ensure they're good at what they do? How do I trust someone else with my reputation? I was a small business, and I needed to grow, but I didn't want to screw it up. I decided to start small. I hired one person, just to help with content creation. I focused on finding someone who was passionate about social media and could complement my skills. It worked. We expanded our team slowly, and I learned how to delegate effectively. We made mistakes, sure, but each one taught me something valuable. As we started growing, I had to learn how to balance marketing with operations. We were getting more clients, but I was spending so much time on the admin side that I didn't have enough time to innovate. I hired a project manager, and that made all the difference. She took over the logistics and allowed me to focus on growing the business. That's when things really took off. The next few years were a whirlwind. We expanded to multiple cities, built a full team, and eventually we started creating marketing campaigns that were getting national attention. We worked with larger companies, and the more we learned, the more I realized how much I didn't know. But by then, I had a solid team around me, and that was key to surviving the chaos. We built a brand that was known for its results, and the referrals kept pouring in. Fast forward to now. My business has scaled beyond anything I could have imagined. We have over 50 employees, and we've worked with Fortune 500 companies. I no longer worry about having to be the one doing everything. I've learned that scaling a business is about trusting others and allowing them to shine. That's how you grow. But it wasn't easy. There were sleepless nights, failures, and setbacks. There were times when I wanted to quit, times when I thought it wasn't worth it. But every time I wanted to throw in the towel, I remembered why I started. So, to anyone out there thinking about starting a business, I've got one piece of advice. It's going to suck at first. But keep going. Learn from your mistakes, keep improving, and never forget to surround yourself with people who make you better. It's not about being perfect. It's about being persistent. And that persistence will get you where you want to go. I was 26 when I quit my sales job. I wasn't miserable, but I knew I didn't want to be climbing someone else's ladder into my 40s. I had $12,000 saved up, no debt, and a vague idea that I wanted to build something real. It started with a vending machine. Not just any vending machine. I'd read this article about how in Japan, vending machines sell umbrellas, socks, sushi, even electronics. I became obsessed with the idea of turning that into a smarter model in the US, a machine that used real-time sales data and algorithms to optimize product selection, change pricing based on time of day, and even rotate inventory depending on weather. I pitched it to a local gym chain. Basic idea was they wouldn't have to stock the protein bars or pre-workout drinks. I'd handle everything and pay them a cut. I convinced one of the managers to let me try it in a single location for a month. I found a used machine on Craigslist for $1,300, hacked together some software with a friend who coded on the side, and bought $500 worth of health snacks and energy drinks from Costco. I still remember pushing the thing into the gym's lobby myself on a Friday night, praying it wouldn't break down. It made $380 the first week. That might not sound like much, but it was pure validation. I hadn't even advertised it. Just a sign that said Smart Snacks curated daily. Over the next 6 months, I reinvested everything. By month 11, I had 12 machines, mostly in gyms, co-working spaces, and a couple of college dorms. I grossed just over $250,000 that first year, with margins in the 30% range. It felt unreal. I wasn't rich, but I was my own boss, and things were growing. That's when I made the first of many mistakes. I got greedy. I started thinking, this could scale like Uber Eats. If I get funding, I can get to 500 machines in 2 years. I started pitching VCs with this vision of a nationwide AI-powered autonomous retail network. I even made a flashy deck with projections that made no sense. One VC bid. A small firm in Boston offered $650K in exchange for 30% of the company. I said yes without hesitation. I felt like I'd leveled up. But the money changed everything. First, they pushed me to hire a team. So I did. A CTO I barely knew, 2 salespeople, a designer. Burn rate exploded overnight. Then they wanted faster growth. I had 12 profitable machines, and suddenly I was ordering 50 new ones with no clear locations locked in. The pressure to deploy was insane. I ignored my gut and pivoted the product based on investor feedback. We started selling beauty and wellness products instead of snacks, targeting upscale malls. The logic was higher margins, trendier audience. I hated it. It felt fake. The sales tanked. Within 6 months, our burn was $40K/month. I had $80K left in the bank and a team of 5 people looking to me like I had answers. I didn't. I was 27, panicking, and lying awake every night doing math in my head. It crashed hard. We missed a payroll in March. 2 employees quit immediately. The CTO left 2 weeks later. I laid off the rest, returned the last few machines to storage, and emailed the VC partners letting them know we were shutting down. One replied, "Sorry to hear. Happens." That was it. I was broke, bitter, and living in a $900/month studio with no plan. I considered crawling back to sales, but I couldn't stop thinking about what had worked, the first version of the business. The part one actually enjoyed. I gave myself a rule: no investors, no employees, no bull ******** star. I took on some freelance consulting gigs for income and spent nights rebuilding the old system, this time better. Leaner back end, better tracking. And I focused on one vertical: college dorms. Turned out, students were a goldmine for grab-and-go snacks, especially during exam weeks. Instead of vending machines, I switched to smart shelves, open units with RFID tags. Less maintenance, cheaper to install, and more flexible. I signed a deal with a regional university to run a trial in 3 dorms. It worked. Like $5,000/month in net profit kind of worked. That was 3 years ago. Now, I run 47 smart retail shelves across 6 campuses. I partner directly with student orgs to promote the products. I have no employees, just contractors for maintenance, and I do the rest myself with automation. I clear about $14K/month profit. It's not unicorn money, but it's mine. I learned a few hard lessons. 1. Revenue isn't the same as product market fit. 2. Raising money doesn't mean you've succeeded. 3. There's no shame in staying small and real. 4. You only lose if you stop building. Some days I think about going big again. Most days, I'm happy just running something I believe in. If you're thinking about starting something, start small. Solve a problem that matters to you. Ignore the hype. And don't let money change what was already working. Trust me, I've been there. Would you like a version of this story in a downloadable format or tailored for another platform like Medium or LinkedIn? It started with a dare. Literally. My friends and I were at a barbecue 2 summers ago, and someone brought this insanely spicy hot sauce called Dragon's Breath, or something equally absurd. We were all sweating, crying, and coughing, but I made an offhand comment like, "I bet I could make something just as spicy but with actual flavor." My friend Jason, never one to back down from a challenge, said, "All right, hotshot. Make one. We'll judge." The next weekend, I was in my apartment kitchen, Googling fermentation techniques and pepper varieties. I had 0 culinary training, but I liked to cook and had a weird love of spicy food. After 3 failed attempts, I came up with something I called Midnight Fire. It had ghost peppers, roasted garlic, mango, and black vinegar. It was hot, yes, but also smoky, sweet, and a little tangy. My friends loved it. I gave away a few bottles at work. One coworker, Amanda, told me her boyfriend put it on everything, and they wanted more. That was the moment I realized there might be something here. I spent the next 2 months obsessing over hot sauce. I read every subreddit, watched every YouTube video I could find, and ordered obscure ingredients from specialty farms in New Mexico. I learned how to ferment properly, how to pH test, how to bottle safely. My evenings and weekends became hot sauce lab time. I launched an Instagram account called Inferno Alchemy. I posted photos of the sauces, behind-the-scenes kitchen shots, flavor pairings, and spicy food memes. It got slow traction, maybe 200 followers in the first 3 months. But it was a start. Then I did something that changed everything. I set up a booth at a small weekend farmers market near my neighborhood in St. Louis. The fee was $35 for a table. I brought 40 bottles of Midnight Fire and a new flavor I called Solar Fangs, habanero, pineapple, lime, turmeric. I sold out in 2 hours. One woman came back the next week with a friend. "You have to try this sauce," she told her. Another guy asked if I sold wholesale. Wholesale? I hadn't even considered that. But I said yes, took his email, and figured I'd look into it. The next 6 months were a blur. I kept my day job as a marketing analyst but spent every night making sauces. I upgraded to a commercial kitchen rental. I created a Shopify site and got a basic label printer. By the end of the year, I'd made $18,000 in revenue. In January, I took a week off work to attend a regional food expo in Kansas City. I was nervous and surrounded by people with sleek booths and actual marketing budgets. My booth looked like a high school science fair project. But I had free samples, and people kept stopping by. A buyer from a regional grocery chain tried Midnight Fire, raised her eyebrows, and said, "This is better than half the stuff in our aisle." 2 weeks later, I got an email from her. They wanted to do a test run in 12 stores. I called in sick to work and drove to meet her in person. I brought mock-ups of professional labels I'd worked on with a freelance designer and a short pitch deck I'd thrown together. She liked it. We shook hands. That was the moment I knew I couldn't do both jobs anymore. I had $22K in savings, no debt, and a product people seemed to love. I quit the next day. My boss actually said, "Go burn the world down, man," which made me choke up a little. 2023 was the year of grinding. I made sauces in the commercial kitchen from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., did deliveries in the afternoon, then worked on branding, marketing, and sales outreach at night. I set up pop-ups at breweries, partnered with a taco truck, and cold emailed every independent grocery chain in the Midwest. Some months were rough. There was a stretch in July where my ferment spoiled due to a faulty AC unit in the kitchen, and I lost a full week's production. Another time, I mislabeled a batch and had to refund 60 online orders because of a potential allergen issue. I cried in my car that day, but the wins kept stacking. I got featured on a local foodie blog, and sales spiked. A TikTok user with 200K followers reviewed Midnight Fire and said it slaps harder than most breakups. That video brought 5,000 unique visits in 3 days. I sold out of inventory and had to hire 2 part-time kitchen helpers. By the end of the year, we were in 42 stores and had crossed $180,000 in revenue. Profit margins were tight. Everything went back into production, packaging, and labor, but the business was real. This year, I started targeting restaurant partners and private labeling. One barbecue joint downtown now uses solar fangs in their wings. I'm working on a low-sodium version for a vegan deli in Colorado. And as of last week, I signed a letter of intent with a regional distributor who covers 8 states and services over 200 grocery stores. I'm scared out of my mind, but also more excited than I've ever been. What I've learned: starting is free, but scaling is expensive. Know what stage you're at. Your product has to be good. No marketing gimmick saves a bad sauce. People buy from people. I got into most stores by showing up in person and letting them taste the sauce. Branding matters. Good label design increased shelf interest tenfold. Consistency is everything. Every week, rain or shine, I posted, produced, pitched, and improved. If you're out there thinking about starting something, especially something small or silly, don't dismiss it. I literally started because of a dare at a barbecue. Now I employ 3 people, have 70K followers across platforms, and might be on track for $500,000 in sales this year. It's hard, but it's possible. You just have to start, and then not stop. And always wear gloves when handling ghost peppers. Seriously, want to ask about any part of the journey? Happy to share. I'm a 39-year-old guy from Ohio, and for most of my life, I thought I had a pretty solid grasp of what it meant to work hard. My grandfather ran a small hardware store. My mom was a school teacher for 30 years, and I grew up believing that if you stayed humble and didn't complain, things would eventually work out. I opened my bookstore when I was 27. It was supposed to be a quiet, dependable life. I had always loved books and thought people would appreciate a curated space that felt like a second home. The store was called The Lantern, and it had wooden floors, a tiny fireplace, and the kind of chairs that made you forget your phone existed. For the first few years, it was fine. I made enough to pay myself a small salary. Nothing fancy, but it was sustainable. I hosted author readings, book clubs, and even had a silent Sunday where people could just come in and read without talking. But then things started changing. Amazon was always a problem, but what really hurt was the pandemic. Traffic dropped off a cliff. Rent didn't stop. My staff of 3 dwindled down to just me. I didn't want to let it go, but by the end of 2020, I was barely covering utilities. I had a month, maybe 2, before I'd have to shut the doors. That was when I started making videos. It wasn't some genius pivot. I was just venting. I filmed myself sitting in the empty store, talking about how people didn't read like they used to, how isolated everything felt. I'd say things like, "If no one comes in today, I'll just talk to the books," and I guess people found it charming or sad or both. One of those videos went mildly viral, like 40K views, and for the first time in months I got an influx of online orders from people who wanted to support a dying bookstore. That gave me a few weeks of runway, so I kept making videos. But instead of complaining, I started talking about the books themselves. Not reviews, more like life lessons tied to books. Stuff like what Anna Karenina teaches you about burnout, or why the bell jar still hits too close to home in 2021. People resonated with it. I wasn't trying to sell them anything. I was just connecting. And then something unexpected happened. A woman named Erica messaged me. She was a mid-level product manager in Boston, burned out, hating her job, and unsure how to quit. She told me my video on Bartleby, the Scrivener, made her realize she'd been passively opting out of her own life. We started chatting more. I wasn't a therapist, but I listened and suggested books that might help. Soon she sent me $200 for book therapy. She asked me to send her 5 books and included a list of things she was dealing with: work stress, self-worth issues, loneliness. I sent her a box of books with handwritten notes tucked into each one. 2 weeks later, she posted the box on LinkedIn, called it a literary intervention, and it blew up. The next week, I got 87 emails from professionals asking if I did custom therapy boxes. I didn't, but I said yes. I built a type form with some basic questions. What are you going through right now? What do you wish someone would tell you? What kind of stories stick with you? I charged $150 per box to start, shipping included, and curated each one personally. I called the new venture Shelf Help. Within 3 months, I had to reopen my store full-time just to pack and ship boxes. I hired 2 college lit majors part-time. We started sending out 40 to 50 boxes a week, then 100. I raised prices to $200 per box and started offering a subscription model. The key was always the handwritten notes. People weren't paying for books. They could get those on Amazon for half the price. What they wanted was someone to really see them, to say, hey, you're not broken, and here's a story that might help you feel less alone. By the end of the year, Shelf Help had grossed just over $380K. It didn't stop there. A podcast host ordered a box, loved it, and interviewed me. That led to a small feature in Fast Company. A literary agent reached out, saying I had a brand. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I knew I still liked being in the store, surrounded by books and shipping stories to people I'd never meet. Today, Shelf Help is a company with 5 full-time staff, 3 part-timers, and a wait list of over 4,000 people for custom boxes. We've shipped to 14 countries. We launched a digital shelf match quiz that pairs people with reading lists based on their emotional state. We make over $2 million a year in revenue. And yes, I still run the Lantern. But now it's more like a studio than a bookstore. People come in by appointment. It's become something between a literary salon and a sanctuary. Here's the weirdest part. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just didn't want to lose the thing I loved. But in trying to save it, I found something way bigger. People don't want more stuff. They want more meaning. And sometimes, a story is the best therapy there is. If you're sitting on something small, something everyone tells you is dying or pointless, don't be so quick to let go. You might just be a few conversations away from turning it into something no one saw coming. Would I do it all again? Hell yes. But I'd start making videos a lot sooner. 3 years ago, I didn't set out to start a business. I just wanted to prove someone wrong. I was 31, had just been laid off from a marketing job at a mid-sized SaaS company, and my then-girlfriend had just moved out of our apartment. I'd spent 8 years bouncing around corporate jobs that sounded cool on LinkedIn, but felt like eating cardboard in real life. Layoff number 3 was the last straw. I felt like I was always at someone else's mercy. At the bar a few nights later, I was venting to a guy I used to work with, Sam, about how I had an idea for this little productivity tool that would solve a super niche problem I faced constantly, creating client-friendly, exportable progress snapshots for marketing campaigns. Like something prettier than Excel but simpler than building dashboards. Nothing fancy. Just a way to keep clients in the loop without burning hours every week formatting reports. Sam laughed. Not in a cruel way, more in a jaded, corporate war vet kind of way. He said something like, yeah, good luck. No one pays for tools like that unless it's from a big name. It's a nice idea, but no one's going to use it. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was offended, but because part of me believed him. And another part of me wanted him to be wrong badly enough that I cracked open Figma the next morning and started sketching out what I'd later call SnapReef. I had zero technical experience beyond basic HTML/CSS. So I spent 2 weeks binge-watching Webflow tutorials, took a Notion course someone on Twitter recommended, and then strung together the most janky prototype imaginable using Airtable, Zapier, and Google Slides APIs. I made it work, just barely. The first version took me 3 months of trial and error and probably 200 cups of black coffee. I had maybe $8,000 in savings, no backup job lined up, and an increasing sense that I was either about to break through or hit rock bottom. When I launched Snap Reef on Product Hunt, I think it got 112 upvotes. Nothing viral. But 14 people signed up for the free trial. I was over the moon. Out of those 14, 3 converted into paying users. One of them even emailed me. This is exactly what I've been looking for. That email saved my sanity. I screenshotted it and made it my laptop wallpaper. Fast forward 6 months and I had 70 users, mostly freelancers and small marketing agencies. I charged $19/month, which meant I was barely making $1,300/month, less than rent in my city. I tried raising prices, but the churn rate nearly doubled. Turns out, my target market was extremely price sensitive. So I pivoted slightly and added a new feature, white label exports. That one change turned out to be gold. I upped the pricing to $29/month for white label access, and almost half my users upgraded. A few even asked for an annual plan. That was the first time I realized I wasn't selling a product. I was selling trust and professionalism. These people weren't buying software. They were buying a better version of themselves to show to their clients. Year 1 ended at $21K in revenue. Not enough to brag about, but enough to pay my bills and scrape by. Then something crazy happened. One of my early users ran a Slack community for boutique marketing firms. She asked if she could share Snap Reef with her network. I said yes, obviously, and within a week, I had 140 new trial signups. 60 converted. At $29/month. Overnight, I was making over $2,000/month. I DM'd her and offered her 25% of all referrals for a year. She was thrilled. She posted even more about Snap Reef, did a walkthrough on her YouTube channel, 3K subscribers, but all highly relevant, and before I knew it, my inbound was steady. I hired a freelance developer to help replace some of the duct-taped integrations and build a real dashboard. Cost me $12K over 3 months, which felt terrifying at the time. But it freed me up to focus on onboarding, marketing, and doing what I'm good at, talking to people and figuring out what they need. Year 2 ended at $84,000 revenue. That's when I went full-on obsessed. I started recording every onboarding call, with permission, tracking every click, and analyzing user behavior like a maniac. I noticed that the people who stayed past month 3 were all agencies with 5 to 10 clients. So I built a bulk import feature just for them. That one feature halved my churn rate. I also realized that 90% of support requests were about one thing: customizing the export template. So I built a wizard to walk users through that process during onboarding. Conversion rates went up. Support tickets went down. I finally started to sleep more than 5 hours a night. By year 3, I was at $19K/month in recurring revenue. I launched an affiliate program, brought on 2 part-time contractors, one for support, one for content, and kept my head down. Today, Snap Reef does around $33K/month. I work maybe 30 hours a week, mostly on strategic partnerships and making sure users stay happy. I still reply to support tickets here and there, because I never want to lose touch with what people actually care about. I've never taken funding. No ads. No big launch. Just slow, steady growth driven by relationships, feedback loops, and stubbornness. That friend from the bar? I sent him a Snap Reef hoodie last Christmas with a note. Thanks for the motivation. He called me laughing and said, "Okay, you proved me wrong. Drinks on me." So yeah, I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. I just wanted to prove I wasn't crazy. Turns out, I'm both crazy and persistent, and that's enough to build something real. I quit my job, lost $70K, built a business out of a garage, and accidentally became a millionaire in 4 years. This isn't a rags to riches sob story, and I'm not about to sell you a course. I just want to share what happened after I made the worst and best decision of my life, walking out of a 6-figure corporate job with zero plan. 4 years ago, I was working in project management at a tech firm in Seattle. I was 31, making $135K/year, and I hated my life. Not in a dramatic way, just that kind of deep fatigue that sinks in when you spend every day doing something that feels like watching paint dry on someone else's dream. I'd always wanted to build something of my own, but I had no idea what. and the fear of failing and looking stupid kept me in place. Then my dad had a mild stroke. He recovered, thankfully, but seeing him in a hospital bed at 62 messed with my head. I realized I was spending the healthiest years of my life helping someone else hit KPIs. So one Monday morning, while sitting in yet another Zoom meeting about internal processes, I sent a Slack to my boss and quit. No plan. No side hustle. Nothing but a savings cushion of about $78K and a vague idea that I might start a product-based business. I spent the first month feeling like I'd made a huge mistake. I woke up at 11 a.m., ate cereal, scrolled job boards while pretending to brainstorm startup ideas, and told myself I was taking time to decompress. What I was really doing was avoiding the terror of starting from scratch. Then one night, I was talking to a friend who runs a print-on-demand Etsy store. She casually mentioned that personalized home goods, things like doormats, cutting boards, and coasters, were trending like crazy. I'd never used Etsy, but I decided to dig in. What I found was a gap. There were tons of generic products, but very few that catered to a more masculine, minimalist aesthetic. Everything was floral script and heart designs. I decided to test the waters with personalized leather desk pads. Sleek, simple, initials-only kind of stuff. I called in a favor from a college friend who worked in leather goods, designed a prototype, listed it on Etsy, and set up a basic Shopify store. I didn't even have a name yet. I listed under Custom Workspace Co., a placeholder I never bothered to change. The first week, I sold 2. Both to people I didn't know. I screamed. It felt like magic. The next month, I sold 18. I made a net profit of $421. I felt like Elon Musk. Of course, I quickly realized how little I knew. Shipping logistics, production delays, refund requests from customers who didn't understand custom items are non-returnable. My tiny garage workspace was a mess of leather scraps and packing peanuts. I ruined 6 desk pads trying to speed up the embossing process and had to eat the cost. But every order felt like proof I wasn't totally insane. I spent the next year obsessively iterating. I learned how to run Facebook and Instagram ads with an embarrassing amount of trial and error, lost about $5,000 doing that. I added more products, wallets, valet trays, keychains. I hired a local seamstress part-time to help with stitching. Every dollar I made went back into materials and tools. I paid myself nothing. I lived on ramen and anxiety. By year 2, I had grossed $147,000. Net profit was maybe $18,000. I was exhausted but obsessed. I moved operations into a small rented workshop, got a part-time assistant, and launched my own website to reduce Etsy fees. I finally named the business Tactile Supply Company. Things really shifted in year 3. A YouTube EDC, Everyday Carry, influencer reviewed one of my products completely unprompted. I got 2,300 orders in 10 days. I was completely unprepared. Shipping delays spiraled. I had to refund about 100 customers, and my assistant quit from burnout. But that month, we cleared $47K in profit. I hired 2 full-time employees and invested in better equipment. Now, in year 4, we've passed $2.3M in lifetime revenue, with $710K in net profit. I pay myself $120K, gave my dad a car, and built out a real office space with a small workshop attached. I'm still not a genius entrepreneur. I just saw a niche, stuck with it, and made fewer mistakes each month. Here are the 5 biggest lessons I've learned, in case anyone else is teetering on the edge of quitting. 1. You need pain to move. I never would have left my job if I'd been just a little more comfortable. Discomfort is fuel. Don't wait for a perfect moment. Use your misery. 2. Focus on one thing first. I tried expanding too fast. T-shirts, mugs, even wood engravings. Total waste. The moment I focused on leather accessories and nailed the customer experience, everything changed. 3. Aesthetic matters. My early products were okay, but once I leaned into sharp branding, consistent packaging, and better product photography, conversion rates doubled. Humans buy with their eyes. 4. You will screw up. Publicly. I've had orders lost, packages stolen, and one influencer trashed my product quality in front of 200K people. I lived through it. Own the mistake, fix it, move on. 5. You don't need to invent something new. Personalized leather goods aren't revolutionary, but making them slightly better for a specific audience made all the difference. These days, I still work more than I did in corporate. But the work matters to me. I build products that I'm proud of. I get emails from customers who gifted something special for a promotion, a wedding, or a retirement. I've even had 3 customers get tattoos of our logo, something I still can't wrap my head around. Most importantly, I no longer feel like I'm wasting time. I'm not saying quit your job today and start embossing leather in your garage. I'm saying, if there's a voice in your head whispering that you're meant to do something else, listen. The risk is real, but the regret of not trying is worse. I'll probably screw up 10 more times this year. I'm okay with that now, because every mistake brings me closer to building something I can be proud of long after I'm gone. Thanks for reading. When I was 27, I was stuck in a job I hated, mid-level marketing at a B2B SaaS company. It paid the bills and then some, but it drained my soul. I'd wake up dreading every Slack notification, every 9 a.m. sync, and the fake enthusiasm I had to pour into every new activation strategy. I lived in a small apartment in Chicago, and the one thing that kept me sane was making candles. I started during the pandemic. Like most people, I was bored, anxious, and looking for something to do with my hands. I ordered a DIY soy candle kit online and fell in love with the process. Melting the wax, mixing in the oils, watching the hot liquid solidify into something calming. It gave me a sense of control in a chaotic world. Eventually, I moved beyond kits and started sourcing better ingredients. Coconut soy wax, essential oils from sustainable suppliers, wooden wicks that crackled like a fireplace. I was making candles almost every weekend. Friends started asking for them. I gave a few away as gifts, then started selling small batches through my Instagram for $15 a pop, mostly just to cover the cost of materials. I called the brand Loon and Hearth. It sounded earthy and clean. I designed a simple logo on Canva and printed my own labels. Then one of my friends posted about my candles on her interior design blog, and that post somehow got picked up by a small lifestyle influencer. She had about 80K followers. Nothing huge. But overnight, I got 500 orders. I wasn't remotely ready for that. I had about 10 jars on hand, and I'd been buying wax in 10-pound bags off Amazon. My kitchen looked like a witch's apothecary, with pots of wax cooling on every surface. I ended up staying up 3 nights in a row fulfilling the first 100 orders. I refunded the rest and promised restock soon. People were surprisingly chill about it. At that point, I had a choice: go back to casual side hustle or go all in. I went in. I took $8,000 from my savings and invested in a Shopify store, bulk ingredients, and custom glass jars with my logo embossed on the bottom. I also hired a local friend to help with production part-time. I launched 3 scents officially: Forest Morning, Drift, and Salt Bloom. Each one had its own little story printed on a card. I priced them at $28 each. The second launch sold out in 48 hours. I started getting messages from boutique shops asking to stock my candles. That led to wholesale pricing, packaging tweaks, and spending my nights researching supply chains and negotiating with glass manufacturers in China via Alibaba. I learned about lead times, freight shipping, and how dangerous it is to run a business with no real inventory management system. At this point, I was still working full-time. My boss began noticing my productivity slipping. I'd be taking calls in the back room of my candle studio, aka my guest bathroom that had the best ventilation. Finally, after a team meeting where I completely blanked on a campaign update I was supposed to lead, she pulled me aside. "I think you're clearly burned out. Maybe you need a break. Or a change." That night I quit. I had just crossed $35K in revenue, with about 40% profit margin. It was enough of a runway for me to give this candle thing a serious shot. I doubled down on digital ads, hired a freelance copywriter to refine the brand voice, and started an email newsletter called Scent Notes that shared little stories behind each scent. I also quietly launched a subscription service. Every 2 months, you'd get a new scent, sometimes a test run, sometimes a seasonal favorite. About 200 people signed up in the first month. They were basically paying me to beta test new products. Then, someone on TikTok did an unboxing of our Winter Dusk scent. The video went viral. I gained 10,000 followers in a weekend and had $60K in sales in 5 days. My Shopify literally crashed. I cried, not from joy, but from panic. I had nowhere near the capacity to fulfill all those orders. I ended up partnering with a local co-packing facility that specialized in small batch natural products. They'd make the candles using my formulations, and I'd focus on marketing, our /ND, and customer service. That was the hardest leap, letting go of making the product myself, but it saved my sanity. By the end of year one, Loon and Hearth had made $450K in revenue. Year two, I hired a small team. 2 full-time employees for ops and customer support, a part-time brand manager, and a fulfillment assistant who worked with the co-packer. We expanded into diffusers and room sprays. Whole Foods reached out to carry us regionally. I said no. I didn't want to scale too fast or compromise on quality. We got into a few niche wellness stores instead. We hit $1.2 million in revenue that year. I paid myself a modest salary, $60K, just enough to live comfortably and reinvest in growth. A lot of people think I got lucky. I don't disagree entirely. That first influencer boost was pure luck. But what followed wasn't. I didn't chase mass market trends. I didn't cut corners. I wrote handwritten thank you notes to every subscriber until we had over 800 of them. I still read every product review and reply to DMs. And I kept it lean. I never raised outside funding. No debt. No venture capital. Just slow, steady growth. Now it's year 4. We just launched a pop-up retail space in New York's West Village. We employ 8 full-time people. We do scent design for boutique hotels and just signed a licensing deal to co-create a scent line with a luxury linen brand. Every now and then, I still make a candle by hand, just to remember how it started. Standing in my tiny kitchen, melting wax in a double boiler, hoping the smell of eucalyptus and cedarwood would drown out the sound of Slack notifications. What's wild is that I used to think entrepreneurship was about pitching investors, building tech, or being on Shark Tank. Turns out, it can start with something as small as lighting a candle and paying attention to what the flame tells you. Back in 2017, I was broke, jobless, and sleeping on a torn couch in my sister's basement in upstate New York. I'd just come out of a failed attempt at launching a mobile app for dog walking coordination, don't ask, and I had $183 to my name. My credit cards were maxed out, and my ego was shattered after I had to call my sister to ask if I could crash with her for a week or 2. That turned into 6 months. It all started with a chair. A leather office chair, to be exact. I found it abandoned near a dumpster behind a strip mall. The leather was cracked, the wheels were rusted, but I saw something in it. Maybe it was delusion, maybe it was desperation. I hauled it back to my sister's place, cleaned it up, buffed the leather with some polish I found under the sink, tightened the bolts, and listed it on Facebook Marketplace for $45. It sold within 3 hours. A light bulb flickered on. The next day, I went to every strip mall and office park I could find. It was amazing how many semi-decent chairs, desks, and filing cabinets people were just throwing away. I borrowed my sister's minivan and did what I later called urban treasure hunting. By the end of that first month, I'd sold 17 pieces of furniture and made around $100 profit. For someone who had been eating instant noodles every night, it was euphoric. I started putting together a system, sourcing in the mornings, restoring in the afternoons, and posting listings in the evenings. But things really took off when I met Omar. Omar ran a small moving company and happened to buy a desk from me. He noticed how many items I had piled in my sister's garage and asked if I needed help moving or hauling bigger stuff. Within a week, he became my unofficial business partner. He'd get calls from people moving offices, downsizing, or just clearing space, and instead of dumping the furniture, he'd call me. We split revenue on anything he sourced 60/40ths. By the end of the year, I was making around $4K/month consistently. Then came the turning point. I got an order from a small co-working startup in Jersey City that wanted to furnish their entire space with eco-conscious secondhand office furniture. They had a $12,000 budget. I didn't blink. I said yes. I had never handled an order that big. I panicked that night. I called everyone I knew, including my high school friend Josh who worked in design. He helped me draft a plan, and Omar handled the logistics. We pulled it off in 2 weeks. They were thrilled. That project turned into a referral to another startup, then another. By mid-2019, I'd moved into a 2,000-square-foot warehouse in Newark and had 2 employees, both of whom I found through Craigslist. We officially became Second Spin Workspaces. The pitch was simple. We upcycled commercial office furniture and gave startups a stylish, sustainable, and affordable alternative to IKEA. We cleaned, refurbished, and sometimes redesigned furniture. I even got Josh to come on part-time to style sets for our listings. Our social media started gaining traction. Before I knew it, I was doing podcasts, speaking at local business events, and getting write-ups in local press. People loved the scrappy sustainability story. By 2021, right after the peak of the remote work revolution, we hit $3.1 million in annual revenue. We had a team of 14, a 10,000 square foot warehouse, and even a small showroom in Brooklyn. I had moved into a loft with a view of the Manhattan skyline and bought myself a used Tesla. I thought I'd made it, but I ignored the warnings. First, we overhired. I wanted to be the cool boss, so I hired fast and loose, even when our cash flow didn't support it. Our payroll went from $19K/month to $65K/month in less than a year. Then I expanded into a second warehouse in Philly, thinking I could replicate our model there. What I didn't consider was that my logistics partnership with Omar was a huge factor in our success, and he was NYC-based. The Philly branch never took off. The warehouse sat half-empty for 8 months while I bled money on rent and wages. The real blow came in early 2022 when supply chains normalized and big retailers started slashing prices. Suddenly, it wasn't that expensive to buy new anymore, and we were competing with Wayfair, Amazon Basics, and liquidation sales from post-COVID office closures. Our margins got thinner and thinner. I tried pivoting, offering design services, subscription office furniture, even a B2B line, but it was too little, too late. Debt piled up. I laid off 9 employees in 2 weeks. It was the worst day of my life. By the end of 2022, I had to shut down the Philly warehouse. In April 2023, I sold our Brooklyn showroom lease at a loss and moved back into the Newark warehouse to cut costs. In November 2023, I officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I spent New Year's Eve alone in my office, eating Chinese takeout, surrounded by unsold chairs. There was no dramatic moment of realization, no epiphany, just silence, cold air, and the overwhelming feeling of failure. And then, slowly, things started to change. In early 2024, I started posting behind-the-scenes videos of the business, how I fixed broken chairs, the story of my worst flip, the time I was almost scammed by a fake startup. People responded. They liked the honesty. I rebranded the business to Respun Studios, a solo operation now, and turned it into a one-man consultancy/content hybrid. I still restore and sell furniture on a small scale, but most of my income now comes from social media, partnerships, and teaching others how to start urban flipping side hustles. Last month, I made $14,200 in profit. Not millions, but enough. Enough to breathe. I still don't have health insurance. I still drive the same beat-up van. But for the first time, I feel like I understand what this game really is. It's not about blowing up or going viral or chasing revenue records. It's about resilience. About knowing that even if you lose it all, you can get back up. And yeah, it all started with a broken chair. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.